Alright, so this is a continuation of my last video, why you can't find arrowheads. In that video I talk about important factors in a location's arrowhead quantity, including warmer than a USDA 6A climate for year-round settlement, the ancient settlement's proximity to knappable stone, which would negate preference for wood, bone, or antler projectile points and make stone more likely to be used, the proximity to coastal regions, which allows people to rely more heavily on fish, seals, and other aquatic fauna which require tools such as baskets, nets, and bone harpoons, rather than hunting terrestrial game which would require arrowheads. Glaciers and their effects on the burying and destroying of artifacts via glacial till, and so on. If you've met all these criteria of a milder climate with proximity to knappable stone, at least 50 miles from the ocean or coastal regions, and preferably your location was not part of glacial till sediments, then this video is for you. Alright, before we get into this, don't skip, even if you know what I am about to talk about, because it's critical that you understand this before we can move on. One, an arrowhead is a tool used to take down game. Where game is sparse, arrows will be sparser. Where game is rich, arrows may be plentiful. You would not find fishing hooks out in central Nevada, but you may find a lot of them along any river, stream, or creek. So, like a fishing hook is a tool to catch fish, an arrowhead is a tool to bring meat to the table. You have to keep this mentality that they may be cool points to you, but to the people who made them, they were a tool used as a means to an end, and that end is meat. So where did ancient peoples usually hunt for their meat? The best location to look for is for discarded or lost arrowheads is anywhere along running fresh water that also bears fish. Fish and running water increase the chances of a native settlement on that river. Forested areas increase the chances of lost arrows or arrows too far in thickets to retrieve, which adds to accumulation of points. Let's go through a trial of a few areas so you get the idea. Area 1 is a small stream near Butte, Montana. It's forested, it has fish, it's running water. Why would there not be arrowheads there? First of all, let's take a look at a geologic survey map, and you can see here that there is no close by within 30 to 40 miles in a complete circular radius of any good knappable stone. Now that's not too much of an issue if the river connects to any sort of sources of knappable stone, but it does not. Then let's take a look at the elevation. Okay, it's ridiculously high up. It's to the point where if you go from sea level to there, you're going to have mild altitude sickness. So the chances that people are actually going to go up there and there's nothing even there to find stone-wise is going to be more rare than for lowland areas. So we're already at a disadvantage here. Very high up, the stream does not connect to any knappable sources of rock, and there really aren't any knappable sources of rocks even away from the stream for a huge radius around the stream. The other thing is, let's take a look at, because the elevation is very high as well, let's take a look at the climate. Okay, it's freezing cold 90% of the year, which means that people aren't going to really want to create permanent settlements in an area where there isn't anything for them there. Very high up, no navigable stone, freezing cold temperatures, inability to grow crops. Your chances of finding arrowheads are very low. Oh, but you said that streams and streams were great, and if they had running water and fish and forested. This is why this is a part 2 continuation, because it's not as clean cut as that. Some places may have all of those things, but be in a very, very unfortunate area. So this is one example of how we can use the process of elimination to test if there would be likely to be something there. I can guarantee you right now that if we were to go to that creek, you really wouldn't find anything. I'd give you 12 hours and you would find not a single point. All right, location number 2 looks like this. And now I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, well, that's a desert. And like you said, there'd be no fishing hooks in Nevada. However, I actually found this location without actually even knowing that it was going to be a national monument for pueblos and the different ruins left over by some ancient peoples. But what I did was I looked on Macrostrat and I saw that there was chert and there was water, and the location, this area in Flagstaff, also happens to be in high elevation. Now, think about this. High elevation doesn't work very well in northern regions because it becomes too cold for too long. However, in southern regions where it's very warm, this causes, like higher elevation causes rainfall. It causes precipitation and snowfall, which leads to better streams that last longer and more year-round. So higher elevation is actually helpful for finding native settlements when you're dealing with the desert. So here's another instance where something doesn't make sense in the north but makes sense in the south. The other thing is the most important part is really that nappable stone right there, which you can find on macrostrat.org. I'll leave a link in the description so that you can look for your own areas and filter by chert or agate or jasper, whatever your lithology is in that local area. This is the other most important thing about these things is I check historic aerials. If we go back to location 1 and we look at the Butte River over there, you can see that it's been there since 1952, which means that it's probably before erosion and the creation of the highway. You can see that it still does exist there. And so that's a good sign. It's not great, but going 72 years into the past and seeing that it's still in the same spot means that the erosion in that area is not super high. Sometimes rivers completely erode. And where the stream used to be where natives were settling on has warped and bended and oxbowed into different areas that are no longer the original settlement. And then you may not find arrowheads because you're in an area that they never even had access to. So checking historic aerials is also incredibly important when looking for previous native sites. I will say that it's really difficult to make judgments because the planes that took those photos really don't go back that far. You're looking at a settlement that existed thousands of years ago, and you can only look maximum 80 or 90 years ago, maybe, if you're really lucky. The other thing is the climate just changes over time based on different jet streams and different wind patterns and things like this. And so Arizona back in the day in Phoenix used to look a lot like this, and now it looks horrible because we have demolished the river system, removing all of the natural irrigation and sending it to water cows and corn and other things. Well, the natives had a different system of utilizing the water so that they could return water to the natural estuaries and riparian environments without damaging it. So desert areas that may seem completely disturbed and no one would ever want to live there now might have been lush. Another example is this beautiful cave that's deep Paleo-Indians, like 13 to 15,000 years ago in the Oregon desert, where they found artifacts and all kinds of points in Clovis. And that area, no one would want to inhabit it in this day. But back when they were there, it looked like this. It was beautiful. There was camels, there was wild horses, and there was megafauna and mammoths, and it was forested, and now it's obliterated and demolished. So you have to also keep in mind what the landscape looked like and where rivers might have been that no longer exist. Now, before I tell you this and you live in a really horrible area and you say, well, what if it was? What if it was amazing back in the past? It's a lot more than guesswork. You really have to go back into Google Maps and Google Earth, and you have to look for wear lines into the earth of where water and rivers may have formed. And you have to look at for canyons and other gorges and areas where water passed through that may have existed thousands of years ago. But this is also a double-edged sword because it may have existed 30,000 years ago before people had even settled the land, or 50,000 or 100,000, and the markings are still there, but natives never saw water in it. When they arrived, it was dry, and it's still dry today. So it's always kind of a gamble, but that's exactly what arrowhead hunting is. Here's a bunch of different native settlements that are ruins now at this point, and you can see that they all have a river next to them, or in very, very, very rare cases, like some of the Mayan pyramids, they rely on the cenotes, which is a type of underground lime-formed water reservoir. However, 90%, I'd say 99%, are based on running water like rivers, so it can carry away their waste and it could bring new food. Cenotes have a limited amount of food and it can't really be replenished until breeding happens, but fish can travel downstream from other areas, so rivers are always going to be king. Actually, here's a couple examples of modern cities, all the way from like China and onwards, and Mexico and the United States, and just to show you, here's a huge plethora of examples. Now, I didn't go looking on rivers, I just typed in the name of major cities, and you can do this too, but pretty much every major city, or actually every minor city, every small town, even villages in the middle of Jalisco, will have a river flowing through it because it's so critical for human life. And there's no difference between you and me and the indigenous people that lived 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, 20,000 years ago. They all needed running fresh water. So this is why it's absolutely critical that if you're looking, you should always look on farmland next to rivers where they would have hunted up in the hills, or you should look along the river itself.